The IRS just released a list of the top 10 things to avoid on your tax return this year. I'm going to go through those with you and give you some examples and try to help you make sure you don't make the same mistakes. Now, once we go through the list of what the IRS has, I've got a couple there at the end for you that I want to go through of mistakes that I've seen. So stay with me to the end. A couple key points that I think you'll find useful. So number one, collect all tax-related paperwork. Now, this seems simple, but as somebody who's been doing thousands of returns for years and years and years, one of the things that I see happen quite often is people forget to bring in all their information. It's one of the things that slows us up the most in the profession is trying to chase down documents. Now, that's if you have a professional doing it. If you're doing it yourself, you have nobody double checking to make sure you didn't miss something. So make sure you're very careful to collect all your paperwork. Now, a little tip right there, pro tips, what we do is take a look at last year's return and all the source documents. The truth is, generally, if you had it last year, you're gonna have it this year. And if you're working on the return and you don't have something from last year, it probably got lost in the mail, or maybe they've switched to paperless so you have to download it. So take a look at last year and also do a 2-year comparison. If your refund's different from last year or the amount you owe is different from last year by very much, you've probably missed something. So that's number one. Number two, use electronic filing. Trust me, this one is very, very true. The advantage of electronic filing is that however you've prepared your return, it gets submitted electronically. And then you're like, duh. Well, the thing is, that's really a big deal because otherwise it goes to an IRS processing center and now you're dependent on some tax clerk to enter and get it right. And if they make any kind of a mistake, guess what? You're going to be getting a notice to try to clean up something that was probably done right to start with. E-filing avoids all that. It gets it in accurately and just avoids so much pain. So e-file if at all possible. It's going to make your life better. Now, number three is ensure the filing status is correct. You might not think that one's a thing, but I see it all the time, especially with kids. So if your kids are at a working age and they're filing their own return, make sure that they show that you can claim them if you're actually eligible to. It's another video. But this one happens all the time. The kid gets their W-2, they run and file their tax return real quick to get their little refund, and they claim themselves. And now mom and dad can't claim the child. Well, they can, but now we're going to have to paper file, and it's going to be a big mess to get sorted out. So make sure you get your filing status correct. And then there's also things like head of household versus single versus married filing joint. And head of household can be a big advantage. So take a look at filing statuses and make sure you get right. The IRS is right on that one. Next one's really simple. Make sure your names, birth dates, and socials are correct. Seems crazy. Happens all the time. Good thing is though, if you go back to what we said about the prior about e-filing, if you e-file and your social security number does not match your name, it'll kick it out. And that's one of the advantages. So that'll actually get solved. You can fix it, resubmit, no harm, no foul. But if you paper file, once again, it goes in, somebody finds out it doesn't work. Now we got notices and letters and a big mess to clean up. Now on that same level, one of the most common ones I see is when you get married. So often we change our name. Generally, it's the wife who changes her name, but whatever. You change your name, you don't get it done at the Social Security Administration, and so when we file your return, it gets rejected. So make sure that you've updated your information with Social Security. If you just got married, maybe we should go ahead and file the return first and then do the update. It does take them a while to get the update through. Sometimes it can take quite a while. So don't get overstressed on this. If you have changed your name but you file your return and it got rejected, go ahead and put your maiden name back in to the software, resubmit, and then double check with Social Security to make sure they got it correct. Not a big deal. We see this one all the time, but it happens. So watch out for that, and don't be surprised if it takes longer for the IRS and Social Security to communicate than you thought it would. Okay, moving along, answer the digital asset question. I know a lot of people who are doing Bitcoin and all these other things think they don't have to answer this and they're trying to stay below the radar. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's the law for one, so just do it. But two, I've seen several cases now where they thought they didn't have to do it, but Robinhood or wherever they were trading at, went ahead and sent in the 1099 to the IRS anyway, and here you are 3 years later with a notice. You got a big tax bill that maybe you didn't even owe if you just reported it. So make sure you check that question, and if you had any, especially if you had any sales, make sure you report those sales. You just don't want to deal with the notice with the IRS, and that's the point. Is we want you to have as good of an experience as you can with the IRS, if that's even a thing. Same vein, next one they have on here is report all taxable income. One of the myths that I hear out there is, well, I didn't get a 1099, I don't have to report it. That's false. The IRS says that all income must be reported. So if you got $20 of income, you should be reporting it whether or not you got a 1099. So don't fall for the, if I didn't get a 1099, I don't have to report it. When you think about that, that doesn't even make sense, because so many businesses, take for instance mine, most of my clients don't pay me enough to be required to send a 1099. So does that mean I don't have to report half my income? Of course not. That doesn't even make sense. So don't fall into that trap or let your buddy tell you you don't have to do that. Report all your income, and life's just going to be a lot better. It's the right thing to do. Next one on the list they have is make sure bank information is correct. I've seen this happen multiple times. We actually make our clients sign a form to verify it, because if you send it in and your bank information is correct, what's going to happen is the bank's going to reject that deposit. It's going to back to the IRS. Now the IRS is going to then have to issue a paper check, and it's going to go snail mail, and the whole thing gets delayed and can take weeks and weeks longer than if you just made sure that was right to start with. Just be careful. A lot of times you forget that you changed your bank account, so you just keep it the same as last year. And if you have a preparer, don't take this for granted either. Make sure that you go back and think, did I change my bank account last year? Was I a victim of identity theft, so we shifted things or whatever? Be very careful of that, because it's just a mess. You don't want to deal with it. And I've actually had clients come in, sign the paperwork, we file the tax return, and they're not even thinking about it, and a week later they went and closed their bank account before the money got there. And so now you're stuck in this loop waiting for it. So this stuff happens. So I just want you guys to think about it, be careful, don't make these mistakes. That's enough on that one. Next one they have is sign and date the return. I've seen notices on that where somebody mailed in a return and they forgot to sign it, and the IRS sends a copy back showing it. So be careful to sign it. Now, we pretty much only e-file unless there's just an extreme reason, for the reasons we said earlier. And for that, you have to sign an 8879 for us to be able to send it. So you're never going to have that problem as a general rule if you're using a preparer. But if you're doing it yourself, especially if you're doing mail, make sure you don't forget to sign it. Once again, you don't want to have to try to deal with the IRS and clean this stuff up. Just do it right to start with. Same vein, they said use correct addresses. Same stuff, obvious. Make sure your address is right. If you moved, make sure you update it. This really can come into play when you have a preparer. Preparer may miss it, even if you told them. Double check it. Your preparer is human. They can make a mistake. They could be working too late at night. They might miss it. So double check that, and whatever, that's all I got to say on that. Retain a copy for your records. I mean, so many of these are like does, right? Keep a copy. And digital's fine. Just make sure it's somewhere where you can access it. You need to keep it for at least 7 years. There's some things that you need to keep longer if there is basis issues involved. So make sure you keep copies of your tax returns. Don't rely on your preparer. What if your preparer sells their practice or closes it and they're gone? Every year we hear of a practitioner who may be retired, or worse, something happened to them, and now the client has nothing and they're relying on the preparer to store all the records. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Have your own copy. And even if they have a portal, the portal's great. Same thing. What happens if he stops paying for that portal service? Your records are gone. Keep your own copy. Don't rely on their portal. Download the PDF to your own machine. Save it. Don't rely on other people. Request an extension. If you did get your return filed on time, here we are. We're in April. If you haven't done it yet, chances are you're going to have to file an extension. File the extension. I'll talk about that more here in just a second. Okay, so hopefully you've been finding this useful. Go ahead and subscribe. Now I want to get into some of the things that I've seen with my own practice that I think could be helpful to you. So once again, go ahead and subscribe. Helps us out. And let's go ahead and get into this. All right, so I'm going to add on to what they said about not filing an extension. A while back when interest rates were so cheap, you could kind of maybe not. But now what the IRS is charging, they're charging 8% annual interest rate compounded daily. So if you owe and you haven't paid by April 15th, they're going to start charging you 8% interest on that money compounded daily. So it's going to add up quickly. On top of that, for late payment, they charge 0.5% per month. So it can really start to add up. So what I'm trying to say is, so you didn't get your return filed on time, go ahead and estimate as close as you can what you were going to owe and make that payment by April 15th. That's going to stop that from continuing to grow. But you also have to file the extension. Super critical. If you don't file the extension, it's 5% per month. That adds up real fast. So 8% interest for a late payment, annual. But if you don't file that extension, 5% per month up to a 25%. So you could greatly increase your tax liability if you don't file that extension. And once again, also make that payment if you can, but at least file the extension. Big penalties there. That can save you a lot. I know a lot of you are going to be filing extensions in the summer. If you file the extension and you have a refund, it doesn't matter. They don't care. But if you owe, it can really add up. So at least get it close. But if you file the extension, once again, that's the big one. The late payment, it hurts, but not nearly as much. So get that extension filed. Now, one of the most frustrating ones I have a lot of times is with small business owners and not keeping records. And if that's you, you know it's you. We gotta keep records. When we do your return and then you owe a bunch and you're like, well, what can I do? We can't just make up numbers. You actually have had to have kept those records so that you can get that deduction. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work, but paying taxes is no fun. So make sure you're doing that. As you get bigger, that's when a service like ours can really help out to do the accounting for you. But in the short run, there are some simple programs out there. You can link up with your bank and at least capture most of the data. But don't just wait till the end, because you don't remember what you bought back in February of last year. Let's be honest, you don't remember what you bought 2 weeks ago. I know I don't a lot of times. So you got to stay up on your records. And when you try to do your books in tax season, under the gun, in a rush, you're missing a lot of opportunities. You're probably lying to yourself and hopefully not Uncle Sam, but make sure you take care of your records. It's critical. And then if you ever get audited and you don't have records, it's not going to be a pretty audit. Records are everything. You have to do this as a small business owner. I think that's enough. We'll maybe do some more on some other things, but hopefully that was helpful. Once again, go ahead and subscribe. Don't miss your extension. That's the big takeaway I got from this. A lot of that stuff is a big duh, but file your extensions, make payments if you think you're going to owe. If you've done those two things and you don't get your return done until summer, it's no stress. Filing extensions are no big deal. They don't put you in any kind of a bad situation. Just file it, make an estimate. As long as you're close, it won't be that big of a deal. And have a wonderful rest of your day.